I've seen a lot in my courtroom. Cases that turned my stomach, ones that tested my patience, and others so predictable I could have written the verdict before opening arguments. After 20 years on the bench, nothing surprises me anymore. At least, that's what I thought before today. The bailiff calls the case. I glance at the docket. Marcus Johnson. A common enough name. Aggravated robbery. I barely register the details as I adjust my glasses and prepare to do what I always do. Listen, weigh the facts, apply the law. Routine. Then he walks in. And suddenly, nothing is routine anymore. Marcus Johnson isn't just another defendant. He's Marcus. My best friend from childhood. The boy I used to race down the block until we collapsed, breathless, on his grandmother's porch. The one who dared me to climb the old oak tree in my backyard and laughed when I got stuck. The only person who ever knew the real me, before life pulled us in opposite directions. I grip the edge of my bench, pulse hammering. This isn't possible. We lost touch after high school, after my parents moved us to a different neighborhood, a better one, they said. I went to college, then law school. I don't know. I never knew. Until now. Marcus steps forward, wrists shackled, expression unreadable. His gaze sweeps the room, then lands on me. And I see it. The moment he recognizes me. His jaw tightens. A flicker of something. Shock? Resentment? Maybe both. Crosses his face before he masks it with indifference. But I know him. I knew him. And I can still hear his voice in my head. The way he used to tease me for always following the rules, for never taking risks. One day, you're gonna be in charge of everything, Claire. And I'm gonna be the one breaking the rules just to see what you do. The memory hits like a punch. I clear my throat, forcing myself into the role I know best. Mr. Johnson, you stand accused of aggravated robbery. How do you plead? Marcus doesn't answer right away. He just stares at me, long enough that murmurs ripple through the courtroom. Then, finally, he speaks. Not guilty, Your Honor. His voice is deeper than I remember. Rougher. He's not the boy I knew. He's a grown man, standing before me in an orange jumpsuit, facing a charge that could steal years from his life. And I'm the one who has to decide his fate. The prosecutor, a young, eager attorney named Rachel Connors, steps forward. Your Honor, the defendant is accused of robbing a convenience store at gunpoint. We have surveillance footage, an eyewitness, and a weapon found in his possession. I nod, barely hearing her. My thoughts are spinning. The last time I saw Marcus, we were both 18. He was smiling, promising to call, swearing we'd always be friends. Then, nothing. How did he end up here? More importantly, how am I supposed to be the one to judge him? I grip my gavel like a lifeline, my knuckles white. The courtroom is waiting. Rachel Connors, eager to lay out her case, the defense attorney, Michael Reeves, barely suppressing his own nerves, and Marcus, standing there like a man who's already decided how this will end. I take a slow breath. Proceed, Ms. Connors. Rachel doesn't waste a second. Your Honor, on the night of January 12th, a masked individual entered Joe's Corner Mart. The suspect brandished a firearm, demanded cash from the register, and fled. Security footage places the defendant near the store minutes before the crime, and when officers apprehended him, they found a loaded weapon matching the description given by the clerk. Furthermore, we have an eyewitness who identified Mr. Johnson as the perpetrator. I nod, keeping my expression neutral. Standard opening. Clean. Direct. It should be straightforward. But nothing about this is straightforward. Marcus stands still, arms behind his back, his face unreadable. He hasn't looked at me again. Not once. Michael Reeves steps up, buttoning his suit jacket. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. The prosecution's case hinges on circumstantial evidence. There's no direct proof Marcus Johnson committed this crime, and we intend to demonstrate that in court. His words don't rattle me. They shouldn't. But hearing Marcus Johnson spoken like that, as if he's just another name in the system, hits me in a way I can't explain. I clear my throat, keeping my voice even. Understood. Let's proceed. Rachel calls her first witness, the store clerk. A nervous, wiry man named Keith Ellison takes the stand, shifting under the weight of so many eyes. He swears in, then Rachel begins. Mr. Ellison, can you describe what you saw that night? He licks his lips. Yeah. It was late, near closing. I was counting the register when this guy comes in, all in black, mask over his face. He pulls a gun, tells me to hand over the cash. And did you comply? Of course. I wasn't about to get shot. He glances at Marcus, then away. I did what he said. He grabbed the money and ran. Rachel steps closer. And you're certain the defendant is the man you saw? Ellison hesitates. Just for a second, but I catch it. I mean, yeah, pretty sure. Pretty sure. Michael cuts in, standing. Objection. I exhale. Here we go. On what grounds, Mr. Reeves? The witness just admitted he's not certain. Pretty sure isn't positive identification. Rachel jumps in. The witness recognized the defendant from his voice. He spoke during the robbery, and Mr. Ellison identified him from a lineup the next day. Michael shakes his head. A masked individual. A voice. That's all you have. He turns to Ellison. Mr. Ellison, did you see the suspect's face? Ellison shifts. No. Like I said, he had a mask. So you don't actually know it was my client. Silence. I glance at Marcus. Still no reaction. Finally, Ellison sighs. No, I guess I don't. Michael straightens. No further questions. I rub my temple, forcing myself to stay detached. The law is about facts, not feelings. But sitting here, listening to people debate Marcus's future like he's nothing more than a case file, I feel something tightening in my chest. How did we get here? The day I left our old neighborhood, Marcus had walked me to my front door. You're gonna be something big, Claire. I already know it. I had laughed, nudging him. And you're just gonna sit around and watch. Nah. His grin had faded, something unreadable in his eyes. I'll figure it out. But had he? I look at the man standing before me, the boy I once knew buried beneath years of distance and silence. And I wonder if he ever had a chance at all. By the time the prosecution rests, my head is pounding. On paper, the case looks solid enough. A masked suspect, a gun, a supposed voice identification, but something isn't sitting right. It feels flimsy. Or maybe that's just me, grasping at doubts because I don't want to believe Marcus could have done this. Michael Reeves rises, straightening his tie. Your Honor, the defense calls Marcus Johnson to the stand. A ripple of murmurs moves through the courtroom. Defendants rarely testify. Too much risk, too many ways for a prosecutor to twist their words. But Marcus stands, unshackled now, and steps toward the witness box like a man with nothing to lose. I swallow hard, forcing myself to remain impartial. I can't let personal history interfere. But when Marcus settles into the chair and our eyes finally meet, it's like the years collapse in on themselves. He holds my gaze, unreadable, until Michael steps forward. Marcus, let's start simple. Where were you on the night of January 12th? Walking home. His voice is steady, deeper than I remember. I just left work. And where do you work? Warehouse down on 15th. Michael nods. Did you stop at Joe's Corner Mart that night? Marcus exhales. Yeah, but not during the robbery. Tell me what happened. Marcus shifts in his seat, his hands clasped. I got off my shift around 10. Stopped by the store for a pack of cigarettes. Saw a couple of kids outside. Teenagers, hoodies, acting shady. Didn't think much of it. I went inside, got my smokes, left. That's it. Rachel Connors leans forward, ready to pounce. But the security footage places you near the store just minutes before the robbery. Marcus doesn't blink. Yeah, because I was there, buying cigarettes. Rachel glances at me, then back at him. Then why did the police find a gun in your possession? Marcus's jaw tightens. It wasn't mine. A dry chuckle ripples from the audience. Someone whispers, "Of course it wasn't." I slam my gavel. Order. Marcus's gaze flicks toward the noise, then back to Rachel. "It wasn't mine," he repeats. "The cops stopped me down the block, said I matched the description. I told them I didn't do anything, but they searched me anyway. Found a gun under a dumpster near where I was standing. Next thing I know, I'm in cuffs." Michael raises a hand. "Just to be clear, you weren't carrying a gun?" "No. And yet, you were arrested for armed robbery?" Marcus exhales sharply through his nose. "Welcome to my life." Silence settles over the courtroom. Rachel recovers quickly. "But Mr. Johnson, the clerk identified your voice." He tilts his head. "You ever work a warehouse job, Ms. Connors?" She blinks. "Excuse me. My shift. 10 hours a day. Loud as hell in there. I gotta yell just to have a conversation. You work a job like that long enough, your voice gets rough. Deep." He pauses, letting his words sink in. "Point is, I don't exactly have a unique sound. You got 100 guys in that building who could match my voice." Rachel hesitates. And in that moment, I know she feels it too. The shift. The crack in what should have been an open and shut case. Michael presses the advantage. "Marcus, did you rob Joe's Corner Mart?" "No." "Did you threaten Mr. Ellison with a gun?" "No." "Then why do you think you're sitting here today?" Marcus leans back, his gaze flicking around the room before landing on me. A slow, knowing smile tugs at the corner of his mouth. And when he finally speaks, his voice is quiet but firm. "Because somebody needed me to be guilty." The moment Marcus says it, the air in the courtroom shifts. It's not loud, not dramatic, but it's enough. Enough to plant doubt. Enough to make people shift in their seats. Enough to make me feel something tighten deep in my chest. Rachel Connors regains her composure, but I can see the flicker of hesitation in her eyes. She knows the case isn't as airtight as she thought. She steps forward, her voice crisp. "Mr. Johnson, are you suggesting you were framed?" Marcus lets out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "Nah. Framing takes effort. That would mean somebody actually cared what happened to me." His expression darkens. This is just how it goes." The weight of those words hangs heavy in the air. Rachel clears her throat, pressing on. "You claim the gun wasn't yours. Do you have proof?" Marcus raises a brow. "Do you?" She falters. "Just for a second. It was found near where you were stopped." He leans forward. "You ever been in my neighborhood at night, Ms. Connors? Guns don't sit under dumpsters long. If it was mine, why wouldn't I run? Why would I stick around, waiting to get picked up?" She doesn't answer. Michael stands, adjusting his tie. No further questions. I exhale slowly, my grip tightening on the gavel. The witness is excused. Marcus stands, his eyes locking on mine for the briefest second before he returns to the defense table. I want to look away, pretend this is just another case, another defendant. But I can't. Because I know he's right. I glance at the jury. Some are leaning forward now, no longer just waiting for the prosecution to wrap things up. They're paying attention. And that means trouble for Rachel Connors. She calls her next witness, Detective Brian Carter, lead investigator. He strides to the stand, confident, polished. The kind of cop who's testified 100 times before. Rachel starts. "Detective Carter, can you walk us through the arrest?" Carter nods. "We received a bolo, Be on the lookout for a black male, approximately 6 feet tall, dark clothing, last seen fleeing the scene of an armed robbery. Officers in the area spotted Mr. Johnson a few blocks away. He matched the description, so they detained him. Upon searching the area, they discovered a firearm under a dumpster near where he was stopped. Rachel nods. And did you confirm whether the gun was used in the robbery? Yes, ballistics matched the weapon to the shell casing found at the scene. Was Mr. Johnson's DNA or fingerprints found on the gun? A pause. It's slight, but I catch it. Detective Carter clears his throat. No usable prints were recovered. Michael is already on his feet. Detective, let's be clear. You found a gun, near, not on, my client. No prints. No DNA. Just proximity. Carter's jaw tightens. Correct. And you arrested him because he matched the description? Yes. Michael crosses his arms. 6 feet tall. Black. Wearing dark clothes. He lets that sit for a moment, then glances at the jury. That could describe half the men in his neighborhood, couldn't it? Rachel objects, something about speculation, but it's too late. The seed is planted. And for the first time, I see something shift in Marcus's expression. Not anger. Not fear. Hope. For the first time since he walked into my courtroom, he thinks there's a chance. And that terrifies me. Because if he believes in this system even for a second, if he lets himself hope, what happens when it lets him down? By the time the defense rests, the case isn't just unraveling, it's on life support. The prosecution's evidence is circumstantial at best, and the so-called witness can't even be sure of what he saw. The gun. Found near Marcus, not on him. Fingerprints? None. And yet, I've seen men convicted on less. I sit on the bench, stone-faced, but inside, my mind is a storm. The jury will deliberate soon. I should be thinking about the facts, the law, the process. Instead, all I can think about is the boy I used to know. The boy who used to make me laugh so hard my stomach hurt. The boy who always walked me home, even when his own place was in the opposite direction. The boy who once told me, after getting harassed by a cop for nothing, "One day, Claire, you'll see. It don't matter what we do. Some of us don't get to win." I was 16 when he said that. I didn't understand. Not really. I told him he was wrong, that if you just played by the rules, worked hard, stayed out of trouble, things would be fine. He just shook his head. Now, all these years later, I wonder if he knew this day was coming. "Your Honor," Michael says, pulling me back to the present. Before we proceed to closing arguments, the defense has a motion. I raise an eyebrow. Go on. Michael straightens. The defense moves to dismiss the case on the grounds of insufficient evidence. The courtroom murmurs. It's a bold move, one that rarely works. But Michael isn't wrong. There is no real case. Just assumptions, proximity, and the weight of a system that decided Marcus was guilty before he ever set foot in here. Rachel, of course, objects. Your Honor, the prosecution maintains that there is ample evidence for a jury to decide. Before she can finish, the doors at the back of the courtroom swing open. A uniformed officer hurries inside, whispering something to Rachel. She stiffens, listening, then turns to me. Your Honor, may we approach? I nod, and she and Michael step forward. Rachel takes a deep breath, her voice quieter now. There's been a development. Michael folds his arms. What kind of development? She exhales. Another suspect was just picked up. A 16-year-old. He confessed to the robbery. Silence. A slow, deafening silence. I feel my breath catch, but I don't react. I can't. Michael's voice is sharp. And does this suspect have any connection to my client? Rachel looks away. No. That single word is a bomb going off in the room. Michael leans in, his voice low but deadly. So you're telling me that Marcus Johnson was sitting in jail for weeks, facing years, while the real suspect was out there, walking free? Rachel's lips press together. She knows. She knows this case is done. I turn to her. Do you wish to proceed, Ms. Connors? She swallows. No, Your Honor. The prosecution moves to dismiss all charges against Mr. Johnson. A beat passes. Then I nod. Motion granted. Case dismissed. The sound of my gavel echoes through the courtroom, but Marcus doesn't move. He just sits there, staring straight ahead, as if he doesn't believe it. The bailiff steps over, unlocking his cuffs. The metal clinks, loud in the stunned silence. And only then, does Marcus finally look at me. I expect anger. I expect relief. Maybe even gratitude. But all I see is exhaustion. Like he always knew this wasn't about justice. Just luck. And this time he got lucky. The courtroom empties fast. People move on. The jury, dismissed. The reporters, already crafting their stories. The prosecution, eager to forget. Marcus sits still. I should leave. My job is done. The case is closed. But I can't move. Not yet. Michael pats Marcus's shoulder. You're free to go, man. Marcus doesn't react at first. Then, slowly, he stands. Rolls his shoulders, like he's shaking off something heavy. When he looks at Michael, he nods. Just once. No celebration, no relief. Just acknowledgement. Then, finally, he turns to me. And for the first time since this started, I feel like I can't breathe. I clear my throat, searching for something to say. I'm sorry. No. Too small. I'm glad justice was served. A joke. There was no justice here, only a system that nearly swallowed him whole. So I just say his name. Marcus. A flicker of something crosses his face. A memory, maybe, of who we used to be. Then it's gone. He studies me, arms crossed, head tilted like he's seeing me for the first time. Or maybe for the last. You thought I did it, he says. It's not a question. I don't answer. Because what can I say? That I had doubts. That I wanted so badly for him to be innocent. But even I, someone who knew him before the world made him a suspect, had hesitated? He nods like he already knew. Like he expected it. I open my mouth, but he beats me to it. You did what you had to do. It's not forgiveness. It's not anger. It's something worse. It's acceptance. And somehow, that cuts deeper than anything else. He steps past me, walking toward the door. The same way he did all those years ago, when I left and he stayed behind. This time, I can't let him go. Not without something. I call after him. Marcus. He stops but doesn't turn. I hesitate, then finally ask the question that's been burning in my chest since the moment I saw him in that jumpsuit. How did this happen? He lets out a slow breath. When he speaks, his voice is calm. Tired. You ever think about that tree, Claire? It throws me for a second. What? That oak tree in your yard. The one we used to climb. I nod, confused. Yeah, of course. He turns his head just slightly. You ever notice how you always made it to the top? I freeze. Marcus exhales through his nose, almost like a laugh. And I never did. Then he walks out. I sit there long after he's gone, staring at the empty courtroom, replaying his words over and over in my head. Because the truth is, I never noticed. Not then. But now. Now, I don't think I'll ever forget. If this story resonated with you, share it with those who need to hear it. Let's start conversations that matter and that will lead to change. Subscribe to our channel for more stories like this that challenge us, inspire us, and remind us of what we are capable of when we stand up for what is right.